Our next section looks at the digital front door and how AI is raising the stakes. Moderating this conversation is Dr. Nick Van Terheyden, host of News You Can Use on Healthcare Not Radio. Dr. Nick is an internationally recognized physician and strategist focused on digital health, AI innovation, and the future of care delivery. And then joining him is Chris Pace. He's the VP of Digital Experience Strategy at SearchStax, where he focuses on thought leadership, market positioning, and helping organizations modernize how they connect digital experiences to their businesses. We're going to be talking about how AI is raising the stakes for the digital front door. So Chris, thanks for pivoting. I'm going to go on mute and try to work with Dr. Sledge. And Dr. Nick, you have 30 minutes, and I'll be your timekeeper for you. No worries.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So apologies to everybody if I've now confused you, because I set things up for the biotech industry and now we've switched to the digital front door. So let me first thank Chris for joining us and also for joining early, so that helps us fill in this space. Chris, welcome. Tell us just briefly, if you would, a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, and if this isn't a lesson in resilience, so congrats for everybody on pivoting. For a few decades, I worked inside of health systems. I was at Dignity Health and Banner Health, running marketing teams and leading the charge on the first wave of digital front door back in the late 2010s and going into the pandemic. And about a year ago, I joined SearchStax to be kind of the lived experience guru for the organization that is trying to evangelize the fact that search is literally the front door, and a lot of health systems are not able to pay as close attention to it as they should be. So I was a customer, and now I'm a spokesperson for the company.
I think we're all customers, to be clear, but go on.
Yeah, fair enough.
And we're all as frustrated as I think you're sort of intimating. So, I mean, primarily what you're talking about is, and you know, we formalize this as the digital front door, but the reality is this is how we access. And for those of you, again, I'm sorry, I just date myself too much these days, but who didn't have a collection of bookmarks, right? And you had a bookmark manager because that was essential, because you would never find what you were looking for. Now we use search, and but that's that's a generalized function. And I think what you're talking about is the access. And to be clear, that consumer access in some places is extraordinarily good. I mean, you can go to a website, find exactly what you're looking for. I'm going to challenge anybody. If you want to put it in the questions and say, hey, this site is actually really good, please let us know. But I have yet to find one. And that's really a major issue for the consumers, because we've all got expectations of instant access, instant ability. So you've done some research on it. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, so our hypothesis was that, first, the fact, trust in healthcare and health systems has eroded dramatically since the pandemic, and it's almost done a complete flip. So about 5 years ago, trust in healthcare institutions was in the 70 to 75% range, where patients assumed that health systems prioritize care over profits. And that number has dropped to around 24% now, believe that care is ahead of profits. And so the big macro challenge is kind of like what we're all trying to tackle as a nation and as an industry. But from the marketer's standpoint, we're basically the advocate for the customer and the advocate for the patient before they choose us. And so the thought was, hey, if there are things that we can do to improve the transaction and make that experience a little bit better, maybe we can make some gains on trust. And so that's kind of the whole genesis of the report. And what we found was that not only does a positive digital experience play a role in positive trust, but a bad experience, and including, there was an anecdote in the report that said, if the website looks like it's from the 1990s, I'm not expecting to get modern healthcare. And so,
You
the
think?
first impression is literally
Mm.
judging whether or not your patients are going to do business with you. And it's startling and eye-opening. And also there's ways to solve this pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, look, call me unsurprised by that. I mean, Windows 3.1 interface, no expectations. Um,
Exactly.
so
Yeah, I think my kids would say the way my jaw didn't drop when I saw that.
that's exactly right. So, but I mean, think about this from a leadership standpoint. What are they not doing? I mean, are they outdated in their approach? I mean, what's going on? Because I think generally we're all experiencing this very poorly. So people aren't
Yeah.
paying attention. There's something going on that's not, they're not making any positive changes.
Yeah, I think, if we kind of roll back the clock and look in the last 10 years, there was a big emphasis on consolidation of a web experience. A lot of health systems have grown through
Right.
acquisition and mergers, and in order to get to a unified brand experience on a digital platform, it was essentially like taking a bunch of Lego sets that, like a Star Wars Lego set and a Harry Potter Lego set, and trying to make something out of that. And so great content was available, the ability to find and book appointments was created, but what we ended up finding over the time was that a lot of health system websites were built essentially how the org chart is structured at the organization. So you have access that's delivered through a find a doctor type tool, which is probably a third party tool. You have location finding, which, God forbid you keep that data up to date, because, you're trying to monitor it on Google Maps and Apple Maps and everywhere else. And then your own website should be the source of truth, but sometimes it's not. So trying to keep up with that whack-a-mole game of location accuracy. And then the final thing is the content that delivers to that earning trust and leveraging the credibility in the space that you sit in. And some of the content might have been written for a different brand voice 6 to 7 years ago, and other content might be newer and more prioritized, but it's buried somewhere in a navigation menu. And so, 5 years ago when I was at Banner Health, I had this hypothesis: hey, what if we made search just easy to get all of this information, kind of like Netflix and Spotify and Amazon have all been doing for years, and align with the way people find things? And that way you don't need to do another big replatforming of your website. You can leverage the great content you have. It's just a matter of meeting people where they are and giving them a way to find things the way they are accustomed to everywhere else outside of healthcare.
Yeah, so elevating the experience based on regular consumer experiences, so that we don't get this sort of jaw-dropping experience. Wait, what? As we enter into the system, um, we're in an A. I mean, this is an AI session. This is talking about AI. We haven't talked too much about it, and of course, the first thing I think of as I approach this is, well, that's great. Let's throw our website into an AI tool and have it recast the whole website and just keep doing that. So, that's the fast approach. Is that the right way? Should we be slowing down and trying to consult? I mean, how do we apply AI to this problem?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I think, we have a couple um, roadblocks along the way, or opportunities to work with other teams to get there. So the first is privacy. Um, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, HHS issued a memo that scared the bejesus out of every healthcare marketer in the United States. And that was, oh, you can't do advertising anymore because pixels are trackable, and
Yeah,
that's a
enough of
HIPAA
the pixel
violation.
tracking, boys.
Yes. So that put a halt on a lot of consumer facing digital marketing tactics that required an extra level of scrutiny, and rightfully so. I mean, we should be focused on protecting patients' privacy and doing what's right,
Right.
and doing no harm. But at the same token, the expectations of consumers are in, this sort of rocket ship of acceleration. They're trained on how to use tools like ChatGPT and others already, and they expect information now, and they have little patience for any friction. So, figuring out the balance of what's good for them and what's going to keep your organization out of hot water from a privacy perspective, but then also delivering solutions that align with their needs and how they interact with businesses is point one. And then the second thing is, if your health system is of a level of maturity, which most are there, then there are AI governance committees that dictate how AI is used, which AI platforms are, in scope versus out of scope, and where human in the loop plays a role. And so I think there's a lot of maybe hesitation by some marketing teams to go too far too fast with an AI solution that's consumer facing because of those challenges. And it's like, what can I do today versus what's maybe an ongoing conversation where we can solve for bigger things tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk just briefly about the pixel tracking issue. I mean, that came up. There was a lot of flack over it, and I think rightly so. I think I would suggest that the original intent, to your point, is it was good. I mean, we need to know where you are. Hey, that can give us some context, and there was real value to this. And once again, there was scope creep that ran over the lines. And my sense of this, as I think about how this is applied, and you talked a little bit about this from a governance standpoint, AI oversight, increasingly important. I mean, should the CIO have the AI governance and the clinicians as part of the team that is implementing? And more importantly, I'm interested in what your perspective of the transparency of this is. I mean, is this something that you should have out there? I mean, this should be part of everything that people can see so that they understand what you do and don't do. I know that's sort of the antithesis of behavior in many instances because it's competitive information. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the last point first, I think the challenge, we always have with, maybe the speed to which consumers want to get to the problem they're trying to solve versus understanding how the problem is solved. You think of like every time you download an app on your phone, I mean, how many people in the audience actually read the terms and conditions of downloading that app in the App Store? 0.0% is the right answer. So, and then even those little banners that pop up that say, we are using cookies, accept all, or, go through your preferences.
Meaningless.
No one reads that. They just want to get that out of the way so they can transact. And so I think, from a CYA perspective, organizations do need to have a clear and transparent privacy policy just so that, legal teams can cover their bases. But, in terms of adding value to the patient's experience, I think, the first thing you can do is ask, hey, if you have a patient panel or patient advisory board or what have you, what's enough and what's too much? Like kind of like get to the Goldilocks approach of, if we can personalize, should we personalize down to you or personalize down to a level of relevance that can get you where you need to go? And I think that there's a balance there because, portals can do the deep stuff, but an open facing web experience should be basically enough to guide and direct and lead to an engagement with the patient. And I think that that's the balance that a lot of marketers are trying to get to, because at the end of the day, marketers care about, number one, their customers and patients getting where they need to be, but number two, prove the value to the organization that they're delivering. And that gets into like attribution, and that is super challenging in healthcare. But by having a sound privacy protocol and a platform that can keep you safe, you can also benefit from having the ability to see a little bit deeper into customers' journeys, even if it's de-identified or persona grouped, you can at least start to see where some friction points are. And I think that's where search becomes so important on your site, because people are, they have intent. And, we were talking a little bit ago about how people are looking for you online. All the answers are there. Like every answer, almost of every question that's ever been asked in human history is available within seconds.
Steady the truck there.
but
I
but
think
when
not.
well,
Sorry, go on.
I mean, yeah, it might be a little bit overblown, but
I think
I'm
you're
a
over your
marketer. I'm a
skis.
marketer, so I'm talking about the big promise. So but the bit that I think is missed is, when this high intent, highly informed traffic is coming to your site to do something, they might have follow-up questions that specifically tie their need to what you can do for them. And those questions are intelligence gold for an organization if you are able to see them and act on them. And so that's where site search becomes this intelligence layer that a lot of organizations just aren't able to pay attention to right now.
Right. And to be clear, I was joking a little, but I do feel you were a little bit like the patent office that stated back in 1910. I think we've seen everything that's going to be developed.
Right.
That's right. Just based on the acceleration of knowledge. So
yes,
I think clearly value proposition. There's the opportunity for governance, compliance, the involvement. But let's go into a little bit of basics. AI search versus AI search, and everybody puts AI in front of things and says, "Oh, it's fantastic and different." Tell us a little bit about So where's the value prop? Because we've all been searching for years. I mean, we Googled things as soon as we called it, verbed it. We were searching, but it is different. But how is it different? What are the opportunities and the value there for you?
Yeah. So, early search basically covered who, what, when, where, basic information. I think where we are now in this answer engine and generative response engine era is why and how can be answered, and comparisons are given and recommendations are given. And those require no additional clicks. It's just presented. And so, the challenge we have right now is citation quality. So making sure that, if your brand is trying to participate in that area of the attention economy, then you need to have content that is easily discoverable by LLMs, taxonomy that aligns with how those LLMs find things and then report back in response to questions. And then the third piece is, how do you measure value that you're extending outward? And it becomes more and more challenging the more loose the questions are, because keyword-based search was easy to organize, but the way people ask questions or have conversations with LLMs is like all over the place. So, in this moment, you have to look for things like, how many times is your brand recommended in situations that are in the LLMs, and how often is your site cited? And you can do some of that on the back end. But then, by paying attention to those types of metrics of success, you also have this, that added intelligence layer of, okay, somebody's on my site and they just want to know if a gift shop is open at this one hospital near me. And are you going to trust Google and crowdsourced information? Maybe, but the source of truth, the horse's mouth, so to speak, should be the right answer. And if those questions are being asked, first of all, do you know that they're being asked? And then second of all, are they given the right responses? And a lot of times that result that would be generated in an AI layer on your website, again, doesn't have like a booked appointment at the end of it, or doesn't have some kind of like, contribution margin associated with it, but it's a satisfier. And so again, like just being the source of truth for the internet, I think is the sole responsibility of an organization's website, that and to make transactions easy.
Yeah, so you're singing the song of the CIO. I mean, predominantly the CFO, but the CIO who often reports and certainly has to justify. And this is an ROI question and tying the line back from search. Great example you give where, well, okay, so I found whether the gift shop, but that goodwill is hard to measure. And I think ostensibly based on what I was reading about this and, what I see is you're losing revenue as a result of poor activity. So you've touched on it. How would you advise the leaders, the CIOs, the marketing teams to evaluate these tools? I mean, can you draw lines? Can you show? Because they've got to show ROI. Nobody's
Yes.
making coin, serious coin now. Although, well, maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah.
But predominantly they're not. So they've got to evaluate. Everything has to come with an ROI. What's your advice to them?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look through it. And the first way to evaluate is take off your hat as a marketer for the organization and act like a patient and use your
Yeah.
own website. And, pick a few tasks that are routine that that generate that, if there's no margin, there's no mission, as they say in nonprofit healthcare. So open the doors and see what happens. And I think that the first piece is, if it's hard, if it takes like 2 or 3 steps to even get to a booking flow as a new patient, that's probably too many. And so, you can anecdotally draw the line of, hey, where are some missed opportunities based on click drop off or abandonment or things like that? And if you were to raise that, what does that mean in terms of conversions using your existing conversion rates? You don't have to make up new ones. The second piece is, and I think this is the biggest concept that is missed by a lot of folks that we talk to, and that is the cost of a poor digital experience tends to land in your call center. And so think about the times when you're trying to get to a booking and you're like, get frustrated. You're like, just give me the phone number. And you pick up the phone and make a phone call because you can't figure out how to book an appointment for next week. And that is the role of the call center, to book appointments, generally speaking. But if you had made that role easier for the website to do, that probably saved your organization $15 for that phone call. Right. And all those frictions add up over time. And so the first thing I would do is go talk to your call center leaders and say, hey, how many non-scheduling phone calls do you get per year? Or pick a solution like portal frustration. Like if they can't log into the portal, they can't reset their password, and just add that up and multiply it by $15, and there's your cost. And then you look at, okay, if I were to improve that with better content and better findability, there's an ROI right there that doesn't even involve revenue generated. So then you can start to layer that together and build out a really strong use case.
Yeah, I'm going to call out. It's one of my favorite bees in my bonnet is, walk a day in the shoes. And I think there's actually an extraordinarily large number of quite sad stories of folks that work in healthcare who suddenly go to access it, feel like they're fully enabled, only to discover how difficult it is. And I think your advice is absolutely 100% on. Try it, but you've got to be serious of it. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to attempt to do this," and because that's not the same as having to really need to do it. So, and I would encourage. I mean, this is something that maybe spans the whole organization. Maybe you're asking all of the organization to do that. So I think great advice. As you think about this, is this a user interface issue? Where is the problem in this search? Because you've described it across various interfaces, and you can satisfy it in different ways. Mm-hmm. Where is the sort of core problem in this, and how do you solve for it?
I think it's basically aligning where your customers need to interact with you with questions and delivering an experience that meets them where they are.
Mm.
And, you know, look at probably, I would say 6 out of 10 health system websites, they have search components scattered around. Like, I want to find a location near me. I want to find a doctor near me.
Right. Yep.
Maybe they have some
Enter
like
your zip
career
code
finder.
and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels so archaic. I mean, and no shade to people that are in the trenches doing this work. This is a lot of times how the solutions are delivered. And so, I think thinking through the the pathway that your customers are taking and delivering an experience that not only satisfies how they're going to interact with your organization, but looking outside. And, you know, I mean, we all use like the Amazon example, but I sold this up the chain at my last employer by talking about it this way. So imagine you go to homedepot.com and you want to find stuff to build a deck. And so imagine if Home Depot had a lumber finder and you had to go click through a bunch of facets and features to try and get the right size lumber for your project. They say, oh no, well now I need nails. Okay, so now you go over to the nail finder and you have to figure out, okay, are these galvanized nails? Or I don't know much about construction, but like some different qualifiers to filter down to a solution. And then, oh, well, now do I need a nail gun or a hammer? And imagine there's two separate search experiences for that. We've kind of created that in healthcare
Right.
where you have to choose your adventure first and then go find it versus maybe I don't know where I want to go yet. I want to just explore. And I think that natural conversations are the way people discover things in the modern era. And AI search has gotten us there.
I think great analogy. Um, you can only imagine that. Although, let's be frank, if you're walking around the Home Depot store, it's a little bit like that, to be clear. You've got to go trooping off to all these different places.
Yeah, and good luck finding an associate to help you find anything.
Yeah. Although, I do have a trick. Benefit knowledge here. Go during the week. That's when all
yes.
the really great people are around. So,
That's right.
all right. So, as you think about this, is this more of a business issue? Is it I mean, what are they getting wrong? Why are they not applying the necessary investment? Because I think we've established this is absolutely clear.
Yeah, I think the challenge has been who owns the digital experience. Like being able to answer that question at a health system is. I did a session with some CMOs last month, and I asked the question like, who owns the customer at your health system? Is it marketing? No one raised their hand. Is it operations? No one raised their hand. Is it the physician? No one raised their hand. Then somebody finally chimed in and said, I think everybody owns it. And I
Yeah.
think that's the problem is clarity of roles is not it's not consistent across organizations. And then I think the other thing is marketing teams tend to be asked to do things in the 11th hour versus in hour one. And I think that by having data to support your hypotheses and I used to call this evidence-based marketing. If I was talking to physicians, I'm like, you use evidence-based medicine all the time. We use evidence-based marketing. We know the why behind why patients select us, and we know how much it costs to acquire them as a customer so that we can create a relationship with them. And then we know the cost of eroded trust and eroded loyalty. So having all of that information and just being transparent with clarity, I think that's the most important piece. Don't just fire off dashboards to people with no context. You make sure that you have a good story to tell. And I think that the marketers that are savvy enough to understand the business and the complexities of it, and then also can tell the story of the why, I think will be able to solve this challenge that we have in front of us, which is there's more demand than we can handle in healthcare, but there are pockets of availability and supply that we can
Right.
right size and right match. So how do we make this a lot more efficient for our business and for our patients so that they can get the care they need?
Excellent. All right, so we're running out of time. I got one final question just to let folks know we moved things around. Chris was kind enough to slot in beforehand. Dr. Sledge is going to be joining us in a sec. Closing out, if you would, one thing every healthcare website should improve immediately. That's a tall order.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, aside from search, I think search is the easy button to fix a lot of problems because it's just easy to implement. It doesn't require a lot of IT lift, which is a tax that a lot of health systems can't afford to pay right now with EMR and Epic implementations and all the stuff that's going on. But I think it's really like the easier thing right now is audit your content. Get rid of the stuff that's dated. Understand if your content is structured in a way that answers questions, because that's how LLMs will find you. And then ensure that there's consistency of voice across all your channels, because one thing that will lose trust really quickly is inconsistency of messaging. So whether it's like hours of operation, just bad data, or a voice that doesn't build confidence that you know what you're talking about as an organization. So I think content audits are gold, and then come find me to talk about search.
All right. Well, fantastic. Chris, thank you for joining me. I want to pull out a few notes that I made, and I'll just draw on that last one. Auditing content, removing old information, not least of all for the risk that you're leaving stuff that, is going to put you into trouble, number one. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, I think, and, that consistency, I think, you elegantly made the point of Simon Sinek's, give me the why for all of this. I think
Yep.
absolutely. I'll beat my little drum, walk a day in the shoes. I think that's excellent advice. I know there was lots more. I'm just trying to pull out. And the other thing, if you don't think that this is costing you, just listen to the stat that Chris gave us right at the beginning, which was trust went from 75% to 24. I wrote those down. I'm going, not that I'm surprised, to be clear, just, but imagine what trust you could build and how you would just be like bees to honey for a place that people go, wow, this is great experience. But we've run out of time. Chris, you were very gracious and supremely helpful in jumping in whilst we were struggling getting George on. Thank you for joining the webinar and sharing some of those experiences. I enjoyed the conversation.